Hi everyone. First, a little bit about myself. My name is Trond Bergquist. I come from Norway, and I've been working with Kiwi since November 2017. I've been working with React Native, integrating hotel search into our native app. And after that, I've been working with Project Margarita, which I will tell you about today. So first of all, just briefly, what is Margarita? It's built as a reference implementation on top of our B2B platform Tequila. I'll tell you a little bit more about Tequila afterwards. It's also a monorepo consisting mainly of a GraphQL proxy, a web and a mobile app written with React Native. And it is completely open source, so if you are interested in having a look at the source code, read the documentation and everything, you can visit our Github repo. URL is there, github.com/kiwi.com/margarita. So first of all, what is Tequila? Except for being a Mexican liquor, it's also our B2B platform, which exposes our internal endpoint. So it provides you with flight search, bus search, train search, bookings management, our white label solutions. It also has widgets and a lot of other functionality. It's all available through a REST API. You can also get reports and stats, so product managers, salesmen are happy. You can see how much sales you have done and everything. And the target audience for this is travel agencies, content writers, and software developers such as you. Anyone can go to this URL, tequila.kiwi.com, create their account, start building their software on top of our platform, and gain a percentage of each sale. So please check it out and do something cool with our APIs. It was launched in November 2018, and it's still a work in progress. So there are some features missing. There are some features that will be coming. So it will just be better and better. So why make a margarita when we have tequila? Why did we do it? Well, we wanted to create a reference implementation as an inspiration for all of you who want to use Tequila to build some cool stuff. It's also to get the Tequila API like battle tested, check the documentation that it's good enough. We already found some holes in the documentation which has been improved, so we can make Tequila a better product for you in the end. So when you start to use it, the documentation should be what you need. The cool stuff in Margarita is we are making a proof of concept for shareable UI between web and mobile. I remember in 2016 when I started working with React and was introduced to React Native, I was thinking, okay, cool, maybe now we can make like components that will work on web and mobile, and it will all be great. Then we started working a little bit and found out that it's not so simple, because React Native has its views, text components, which is renders, which is different from divs and span or whatever you render on web. It's also to promote our internal Incubator team. Incubator team consists of members basically from Barcelona, from Prague, and Bratislava. We get to do cool stuff like Margarita. We also have other internal projects, but what I like about working for Kiwi is that we get the possibility to experiment with new technology and be able to improve our skills by working on cool projects like this. It's also inspired by AWS samples. For those of you who know AWS, they also have a lot of example projects explaining how to use their project. So as I mentioned, one of the apps we have in the Margarita monorepo is a GraphQL serverless proxy, which we built on top of the Tequila REST API. So why did we choose to build a GraphQL proxy on top of the REST API we already have? Well, because we are a group of a team of front-end engineers, and we wanted to take advantage of all the cool things that GraphQL offers. So we have the possibility to, in each component, define only the data we need within that component. We have ESLint rules defining, like checking that we are actually using all the data we are asking for, so we don't do any overfetching at all. And yeah, it makes data fetching really easy compared to using, for instance, Redux or something like that to store the data in that kind of store. So what are we using to build this GraphQL server? We are using the Apollo server, GraphQL JS, GraphQL Relay, and we use something from Facebook called Data Loader. Data Loader allows us to do batching and caching. So it works kind of like a per request cache. If you try to hit the same endpoint twice, it will return the cache data, so you're not spamming any APIs unnecessary. It also does batching, which is quite useful because you might end up hitting some endpoint, like say 30 times because you get 30 IDs, but instead you can batch it into one request and send 30 IDs once, which is quite a performance improvement in lots of cases. For now, the GraphQL proxy has a search feature. It has a booking. It has manage my booking. Well, it's just a proxy for the moment because this is one of the features that will come in Tequila in the future, but it's there. And also payments, which is kind of work in progress. And yeah, we have a playground for the GraphQL, which you can go and try out our queries. You can see the schema on the right if you expand it. So this is, well, now it disappeared. Well, it's there. And we also have the GraphQL Voyager, which kind of shows the static server-generated types we get from GraphQL. Both of these URL are available from the documentation on Margarita, on the Github page. So a little bit about the front end. We have a web version, which is powered by Next.js. Next.js is a framework for doing server-side rendered React. It comes pre-configured. It's easy to start. You just download it from Yarn. You can do Yarn next, and it's ready to go. It's also fully configurable, so you can, you have full control of Babel, Webpack, and all those stuff, and it's really easy to get started with. And for the mobile version, we use Expo. Expo is like create React Native app. Like you also get everything set up. You just download the CLI, and you are ready to go. You don't need to know anything about native development at all, and you can make your React Native app, which performs in the same manner as a fully native app. It's really cool. And it's also does upgrading a lot easier than with React Native itself because you don't have to think about native changes. I don't know if anyone of you ever used React Native, but it can be quite painful to do upgrades. Yeah, I mentioned it was a monorepo. We use Yarn workspaces to keep like the different apps in logical workspaces, so it's easier to interact between the apps. Yeah, and the cool thing that lets you do like reuse code between mobile and web is a thing called React Native Web. It's currently only in version 0.11.2, but it's already being used in production by big companies like Twitter, Uber, The Times. And yeah, it works really well. For data fetching, we are using Relay, as I mentioned. We use Context API for local state, and there is no Redux because Relay already has its own internal state, so you don't need any Redux at all. Yeah, the idea behind React Native Web is write once, render anywhere. One of the other apps within Margarita is the Universal Components. This is sort of our component library. Kiwi has something called Orbit Components, which Ludiek will tell you more about later. But that unfortunately only works on the web so far. So for this project, we need a component library which will work on mobile and on web. So we kind of started creating the same kind of components as we already have in Orbit, and we hope that Orbit in the future someday will adopt this structure so it will be compatible with React Native and web. So here's the documentation for it. We have Storybook. We have a documentations link as well. It's lacking a little bit. But this is already a package on NPM, so if anyone of you want to do something similar, you can just get this package from NPM and start use it. Okay, so how do we do this? We have one app which we call Core, which is kind of where we develop the features. This is where we do the search form, we do results listing, manage my booking, and then we have a mobile app, which is a separate workspace which kind of wraps the core, which applies the mobile header, the tab bar, any platform-specific code, and the same for the web where we use Next.js. This app kind of applies the navbar, more padding, which you use on web rather than mobile. And you will just import from core like this, import search from kiwi.com, Margarita core, and it's ready to go. The one thing that differs between the platforms is navigation. Like navigation is done differently on the web and on the mobile. And we didn't want to like props drill navigation from like the root component and all the way down to where it's going to be used, because normally it's used from somewhere within core. So we kind of wrapped a higher order component which handles it and injects navigation depending on the platform. So I wanted to show you a little bit how this looks like how does the apps look like. So, yeah, so on the left you can see the web version, and on the right you see the mobile version. I think the screen is a little bit off, but yeah, there you go. And as you can see, it looks more or less the same. And we have like a date picker. And you can see that on the web, or sorry, on the mobile, it's more or less the same. And we can search, and hopefully we get some answers. So now it's fetching the data from the GraphQL, and the GraphQL fetched it from Tequila. So yeah, as we can see, it looks more or less the same. We had also managed my booking. Let's see. Yeah, that's more or less what we have done so far. So I don't know if you noticed, but there are some differences between the web version and the mobile version, and one of them is the passengers button. I didn't click on it to show, but it looks kind of different on the web than on the mobile. Sometimes there are, and there will always be, different requirements between web and mobile, and so how do we handle it? One way is to use the suffix of the component name, like we can do passenger button.native.js. Could also be .web on the other one, and also it supports .ios and .android if you want to do something specific on Android or iOS. And the bundler will automatically know which component to use when it's bundling the code. Another way to do it is using the platform.os from React Native. You can differentiate between if it's web, iOS, and mobile there as well. And the third version or the third way to do it, which we are using, is the stylesheet.create from Universal Components. This is a wrapper around the stylesheet.create from React Native itself. So we can do CSS differently on iOS, Android, and on the web as we want to. So some lessons learned while doing this. The web version could easily turn into like a mobile version for web, like m.somepage.com. Like, I think we did it quite well on this project so far, but the Manage My Booking page, it doesn't look that well on web yet. So there could be improvements. Media queries is not really supported on React Native Web yet, or I don't think it ever will be. Like the way to do kind of the same is use the dimensions API from React Native and use the onLayout event, so you kind of have to change styles according to breakpoints within each component instead of like doing some CSS. Another thing is pseudo classes and pseudo elements are not supported either, so you cannot say like button :hover. You have to also use events there, like JS events, like on mouse center, on mouse leave, and do your style changes there. Inspecting the DOM with React Native Web is also kind of interesting because everything is a div. If you write a button, it's a div. So if you write a select, it's also a div. So it's not so easy to see and understand what is what. And also for each CSS property you give, it will be one class. So say you give it display flex, justify content center, align item center, it will be 3 different classes. So yeah, it can be a little bit difficult to debug in the DOM. While setting it up, like we had the monorepo, we had our core app, we had the web app, we had the React Native app. We had some difficulties in the start because React Native didn't want to be in a monorepo. It kind of wanted to be in the root itself, so there was like some issues there. Luckily, someone already solved this problem, so it was some npm package that we just download and some script we run pre-start. And there is a good guide on Medium how to solve it if anyone of you are interested in it. We also have like the solution in our repo, so you can just check it out there if it's interesting. And like the question in the end will be, is this the best approach to reuse code between web and mobile? I will say, from what you saw, it's probably around 90–95% code reuse between the mobile version you saw and the web version, which is incredible. But I will say it depends on the requirements of your app. Maybe it's better to just write some components which you can reuse or some parts of the app. Maybe not everything as we did, just wrapping it with the web and native. But in the end, I would say it depends on your use case and if the design is very different, because in the end you can end up tweaking platform code more and it will just make it worse, maybe. So finally, please visit our project on GitHub. The URL is there. You can check out the docs, the GraphQL Playground, the Voyager, and please give us a star. It's nice to know that people are watching our project and like what we do. So thank you. What did you use for user authentication in Next.js using GraphQL? We didn't yet because GraphQL, the manage my booking part is just a mock so far. But we did start to set up some authentication using Firebase. I think we have a merge request for it. It's not done yet, but yeah, it's the quick question. We haven't solved it yet. How do you solve accessibility, A11, and semantic HTML if everything is a div? Yeah, that's a very good question. It's not really up to us to solve because this is more on React Native Web. I didn't check it so thoroughly. All I know is that accessibility within React Native itself is fairly built in, so I expect they could do it somehow. I didn't mention it either, but in our universal component, we do some kind of wrappers around certain components. So, for instance, when you use a button from a universal component, it will actually render a button tag on web. So there are workarounds to get it to work, like semantically well as well. Okay, that's it.